Right, so this is my review of my game level, recently submitted last Friday. Here I'll just be taking a look at the assets in the level, saying how I think I did with it, the overall layout, what I would improve, and what I liked. Right, so this is the start of the level. You start in like a hallway. I didn't really think to do much with this hallway. I just wanted somewhere basic where you could start out and it would be obvious to the player that this would be the start zone. These red lights just basically tell the player where they're supposed to be going, and the doors at the end of the level, of the corridor, are set to open when the player reaches a set point. So here we have the main I'd say zone of the level. This was the bit that I primarily designed, and it was always going to be the biggest part of the level. From this area sticks very close to the origins of the concept art, and I'm pretty pleased with how the final product turned out. To be honest, it is very close to the concept art, bar this raised up bit over here, and the roof's a lot higher, and that's to accommodate for the upstairs layout. But that was because when I was talking to the tutor, he says it would be good to have some elevation variety in the level. So I thought, what better than to add a second floor? But for the most part, the rest of it remains unchanged, other than a few sort of different placements of the doorways, but that's about it really. I mean, these trucks were supposed to be the focal point of the level. They were what grounded the middle point of the level itself. As you can see, there's a particle effect on the exhaust pipes of that truck to make it look like it's running. The only thing I wish I'd been able to have time to do is to implement a running truck sound, but I looked into incorporating custom sounds, and I just couldn't find a simple way to do it without spending ages trying to learn it. But I said in my playthrough that this level was supposed to be more of a arty level, so it's one that relies less on mechanics and more on its modelling and texturing, where people would want to go and have a look around, see what's about. And I feel like I've filled it with enough content to make people interested. But with the time frame I had, I didn't quite get the final bit of polish that I would have liked on the level. But I think for the submission, it's good enough. And I wouldn't have sacrificed any of the art assets for mechanics, because I feel like the art is just so important, as I want to be a 3D artist, that I couldn't sacrifice it for the sake of mechanics, because otherwise I've made that mistake in the past, and you just end up with a game that looks mediocre with a few sort of half-baked mechanics in it. And I just felt like if I want to be a 3D artist, then I've got to really show off my 3D artist skills. So that's really what I aim to do here, and I feel like I did quite well at that. So here we have a crate, and it's relatively high poly for what a crate should be, I'll admit. I didn't really get around to sorting out my LODs and normal maps and all that, but the game engine is handling what I've done fairly well. And when I was modelling these, I did bear in mind that they were going to be used in a games engine, and that meant taking considerations into my poly count, and I did try and keep all my models low poly and still retain a really good aesthetic. But these crates, they were just, I wanted to use something that didn't just look like a conventional box that you may find in a level. I wanted it to fit really well with the environment and the colour scheme, and just to look a bit more sort of bit different to just a normal crate, and I feel like that has been achieved. There's more over here. I just feel that this is a bit more of an interesting crate, and it does fit in with its environment. and I think the poly count reaches, I think it's somewhere around 300 per box, which is probably a bit high for a box, I'll admit, and it's something that I will probably go back and look at when I get this level ready for Showcase, because without a doubt I will want to show this level off at Showcase, so there will be a lot of things changing, and I probably will, now that I have the art out the way mostly, I will try and add some more mechanics. I want to try and turn this map into a first-person shooter level because I feel it has potential for that. But I won't be forgetting the art either. I will be creating a lot of new assets for it, in particular vehicles, because that was the main focus of this level. And the vehicles are going to be what makes it. So I'm going to really try and create some really astounding looking vehicles. So here we have sort of like the entrance into the workshop part of the map. And I've put this garage door at just the right height so that players can crouch underneath it. This is good for sort of first-person shooter sort of level mechanics, but it's also good because with the CryEngine's movement, you can sprint towards this and then slide underneath it, which is really, really good in terms of a shooter mechanic. But as for this door, I implemented a mechanic where you could walk up to this keypad, and if you press the open door command, as so, then the door will open. And there's a proximity trigger on that door, so that when you walk out, the proximity trigger closes the door behind you. Just to show that it is the keypad that's causing the door to open. If I walk up to the door and press the open key, nothing happens. So, moving on. I decided to change the floor here just to mix it up a bit, and it looks a bit more professional if I change the floor in here. Because originally it was going to be white like that, but I wanted something that sort of stood out in the garage, the workshop. Right, so first of all we have sort of like a reception desk sort of thing, and on this we have computers, keyboards and chairs. Now with the chairs I wanted to create something that looked a bit sort of like they were lifted out of a racing car and turned into an office chair. So that means that it's got a glossy black and red backing, as if it's made out of a shiny plastic or metal, and then the front is leather and some kind of fabric. I never really put that much thought into what kind of fabric it would be. But the specular map, these aren't really too shiny, as opposed to the back, which is really quite glossy. The computers, there's nothing really that special about them. It's just sort of really low poly boxes with textures on them to create the effect that I wanted. For Showcase, I probably will put some like paperwork and maybe some coffee mugs and stuff like that on these desks, just to make them look more lived. Like this is an area where people actually work, because I feel that would really bring life to the environment. So over here we have the dyno testers, and there's one of my Mustangs sat on it. I changed the colour scheme for this one just to make it separated from the one over there. So this one looks more like an early development prototype. And as you can see, I've made sure the wheels are sat nicely on the dyno. So these machines are designed to test the power of the cars getting at its wheels. And as you can see on the little laptop, there is a little window that's got the gauges on it to show how much it's producing and stuff like that. There's a few barrels over here just to fill out this big empty space. It was the best I could think to do with it at the time. And here's another one of my car models, which is the Clio. I'll talk about the Clio in a minute, but yeah, it's just to get an overall feel of the environment. There's two dyno testers with two vehicles sat on them. I just wish, to be honest, I had more vehicle assets by the time I got around to making this, because it really would have made the level look better to have two different vehicles on here as opposed to reusing ones that are elsewhere in the level. So if I come over here, we can see there's a little weapon bench, and it has my M16 on it. A weapon box, an ammo box, I'm not quite sure. Which was in the CryEngine's brush library. And here's a chain gun which I made, which is pretty large, and that's because I wanted to give this gun a sense of power, and it's designed to be mounted onto vehicles. I came up with the idea that they would have variations on the size of this weapon to accommodate different sizes of vehicle. But this one in particular was fitted to the truck over there, which I'll get to in a second. And there's just like little things like spanners just sat on the table, and ammo boxes just to make it feel a bit more real. So anyway, here's the first vehicle on the ramp, and it's my Mustang. This is the first version of the Mustang, the one that was textured first, so it's got all the right colour scheme on it and everything. So the dark grey / black with red, that's sort of the red line colours, and I feel it turned out really nicely. And the specular map causes the light to bounce quite nicely off of the curves in the body. Again, there's a few little tools down here with there's the air gun and the air compressor tank. I would have liked to have the tubing going up to it, but I just didn't get time to do things like that. And over here you can see sort of toolboxes and cabinets, all designed to fit in with the overall aesthetic of the area. As you can see, that red is quite a prominent colour, and with the company being called Redline, I thought it was only fitting. So here's one of the assets that I'm most proud of in the scene, and that's the engine, the V8 engine on the engine hoist. I spent quite a lot of time modelling this engine, as you can see, and I've designed it to be low poly. I mean, I say low poly, it's 7,000 polys, but that's quite good for such an asset that could have such high detail on it. And I feel that any more detail would have just been lost, because it's not going to get looked at in the scrutiny that I would look at it myself. So I feel that this is probably the maximum amount of detail that you can extract from an object without people missing details. But as you can see, it's got the texturing, so that it's got a carbon fibre cover on top of it. I feel that the overall model is really, really fantastic, and I'm so pleased with how it turned out. The crane itself, again, just added to the nice look of it. I spent a bit more time just detailing the crane just to make it feel a bit more real. It's easy to get assets like this to look fake, and that's if you start to just model the basics of them and miss out the little details like having bolts to make it look like it's held together properly. I put a lot of attention into how the crane would be lifting the engine, and so that was sort of the best solution, judging by what I could find on sort of Google Images and things like that. So anyway, moving on. I have some of the wheels from the Mustang down here, and some tyres that I made. Nothing too special really, just basic small assets. Here we have my first custom vehicle design. This was the first vehicle I designed myself and fully built in 3D, and it's a bit like a concept car, and that's because it is. But I spent a long time developing this because I really wanted it to be right, and I don't feel like I really achieved what I wanted to, but I feel I created something that I can be pleased with. It takes cues from other vehicles, such as it has quite a Mustang sort of front, and then I just took inspiration from other concept cars really, but you can see cues of the Mustang at the front, that's for sure. But it was really just a design on the fly model, this one was, with the absurdly large wheels on it as well, that was just because I like the idea of a concept car with large wheels. See, it's quite common to see that in the automotive industry, to have a concept car with wheels as big as the arches themselves. Moving on, it's worth talking about these ramps actually, because this is another thing I spent a little bit of time making. Not too long, but enough to make them look nicely detailed and fit into the scene. Again, things like small bolts and just the way it looks like it's all been fitted together properly is just something that adds to the overall look and makes it look a bit more realistic. This is one of the trucks that's sat in the main section, but I changed the texture wrap and took the specular away from this one and simply painted on so it looked like it had been battle damaged. So it's in here to be repaired and refitted. Basically, that was the idea. While you can basically see it's not got anything inside it, but the brake discs are hovering. That was purely just to make it look a bit better when it was on the ramp, and I knew I wouldn't get enough time to fit the engine, but I just in the assignment I just stayed away from focusing on that too much. So hopefully that didn't hurt my grade. Right, so here's the Clio. This is probably one of the models I'm most proud of. I originally created this model about this time last year. Started it, but I didn't finish it for quite a few months. I was still developing my modelling skills back then, and it took me a while to get the hang of how to create this model. Once I had done it, once I came back to it this year, I found that the topology was just awful, and I would need to remake the model, so that's what I did. This is actually a remake of the model. The original can be seen in my portfolio pages, which are on my blog as well. The original uses Arkham Design materials and Max, whereas this is a proper texture map with a specular map on it. But it's pretty close, and I made some changes such as the carbon fibre roof, and the lights are textured as well. I spent a little bit of time trying to get the lights to look right. And overall, I think it turned out pretty well. I mean, the body looks fantastic, and it's probably, I'd say, 3/4 lower poly than the original. It's way over half, I know that, because I just refined my modelling so much, and this model is turbo smooth, which granted isn't great for a games engine, and I'd need to work on that for Showcase, but for now it was appropriate to put in the engine, and it just looked fantastic when I got it in engine finally. Despite having to spend a lot of time remaking the model, it just turned out so nicely, and I was really pleased with how it turned out. Further things such as having some badges on the back would have been nice. Some little things like that is all things that I would be considering to do for Showcase, on top of doing an extra car or two. So that's the paint booth. I really didn't get around to putting anything in there, so I just avoided it. I closed it off because I knew that I didn't have the time to spend making the paint booth look really nice. Right, so if we go in here, you see a dramatic sort of change in the environment. Everything's quite dark in here. There's red lining going around. This was such a great design feature. I thought I had to have it from the beginning. It was in my concept art to have these glowing red lines going around all everywhere. I mean, obviously, apart from the obvious tie between red line and having red lines on the floor. It was kind of a bit it showed the player where to go. It lighted darker areas, and I didn't have to obviously signpost everything where the player had to go, because they could just follow these, and they would do that subliminally. To talk about lighting in the scene for a second, actually, if you look at the roof, we can see that the roof is very bright. And what that is if you've seen The Dark Knight, the Batman film, you can see that his underground sort of bat layer is lit by these sort of overhead. Like the whole roof is just lit up, and that's what provides light to the scene, and that's the kind of effect I tried to achieve here. And I think it turned out pretty well, to be honest. Right, so this is the shooting range. As you can see, it's just a standard shooting range with some targets, and then there's guns lying around, and magazines, and ammo boxes, and all that kind of stuff. See, this is where I spent a little bit of time trying to make it look like an authentic target range. I had some sort of bullet holes and ruined walls and stuff to the textures behind the targets, so the walls look a bit battered, as if like they're in a proper shooting range. And I spent a little bit of time developing these sort of stands and making them look like they fit in here, and I'm quite pleased with how they turned out as well, to be honest. The idea, I did originally have this white lighting going all the way down, and I decided to cover it up with the same material that's on the floor, because I thought that in a real life sort of shooting range, you wouldn't want blinding light sort of above your targets. You'd want it to be relatively nicely balanced in terms of lighting, so you could actually see what you're trying to shoot at. Yeah, so that's the shooting range. I don't think there's really much more I can say about it other than what you can see on screen. But I did also add in an armory, and again it's a keypad, and you press that and you can open it up. This I always wanted it to be a case where you could never actually go up to anything in the armory. You could always just go up to this counter. In the script, this is where you would pick up your M16, so that would be the gun that you'd pick up and continue on with the story. But in this level, it was, like I say, it's purely just an art exercise, so nothing is. The gun mechanics were not incorporated because I just didn't get time to get around to doing it, and I feel that it just would have spoiled the sort of artisticness of the level if I had done it sort of half-baked, like I say. So as you can see, the suit of armour of my character's over there in the back. I thought it was kind of crucial that I include that in at some place, and I thought the armoury was the right place to do it, as I always said in the concept art that the armoury would have the suits of armour. But this one only had one in it because I didn't get around to sort of thinking about a better way to have the suits of armour, or multiple amounts of them. Right, so if we go back, because I'm rambling in there, if we go up the stairs, round and up the stairs, here's just a little interesting bit that I added in because I thought it was nice, was just this little level. If it was in a first person shooter, you could crouch down here and just watch the stairs. It's a little common trick used in quite a lot of first person shooters, and I thought, well, I'm going to have it in mine as well. So these doors open automatically, and here we have the communications room. Now this is substantially different from the concept art of it, but you can see where the inspiration from the concept art comes from, as in there's still the big table and there's still the large monitors and still the workstations. This table I used images for like satellite images from Google Maps, and then edited them to make them look more like they fitted in here, like they weren't just satellite images taken from Google Maps, that they were actually sort of this company's satellites. These monitors just a heavily edited image of a world map. Yeah, and these are actually the tables from Oblivion, which I heavily edited to sort of make it suitable to go in my game, as I really did want to do my own, but it just, like I say, like a lot of things, it just didn't get the time it needed. I realised that when I got to sort of this point, it was coming into crunch time, sort of the last week of the assignment, and I realised that I'd probably bitten off a bit more than I can chew with this level. It was just so big and so many assets I had to make. It became such a behemoth of a task. So this area, it overhangs, and you can look at that. This window is actually a joint breakable, so should you have a weapon, you could break it and then jump down. Again, another part for a first-person shooter, which would be a good sort of level mechanic. So we'll go into the final area of the level, the production monitoring station. The production line itself never actually got completed, again because I didn't have the time. Because, like I say, everything just, the level became a lot bigger than I expected it to, especially with this addition of the second floor, which is my own fault, admittedly, but I feel happy with what I've achieved. So I just basically added some tinted glass onto this, so you can't really see down, you can just see the red lines. And these are the same monitors that were in the communications room, and so are these. So there's not really much about this room really, it's all just reused assets just to make it feel a bit more real. But yeah, so that concludes the level. To be honest, if I had more time, I would love to put more mechanics into it, and I feel that would have boosted my grade, but I can't change that now, and what I've submitted is what I'll be graded against, and I feel that provided I'm graded against my art assets, I feel like I put enough effort in and tried my best with that, and did what I could with the time I had. So yeah, that's my level, and that concludes this video.